Welcome to an unprecedented look at our legal system. What you are about to witness is completely unfiltered and unedited. Prepare yourself for raw, authentic footage captured directly from the front lines of justice, where truth is the only objective.
Don't look away from me. I asked you a question, you're going to answer it right now.
Sir, we didn't do anything.
Don't talk back. I know how this goes. You kids think rules don't apply to you.
This is my iPad. It's ours.
Funny how you all say the same thing. Hand it over before I make this real ugly.
Please.
At 12:47 p.m., inside a McDonald's on Broad Street in suburban Richmond, Virginia, 3 black children sat in a corner booth, sharing a 20-piece nugget box and laughing over their iPads. Elijah was 12. Naomi was 10. Isaiah had just turned 7. They were well-dressed, well-mannered, and completely absorbed in their screens, the kind of quiet Saturday scene that wouldn't draw a second glance from anyone paying attention. Their iPads were brand new, still in bright-colored cases, gifts from their grandmother for straight-A report cards. Their grandmother was Judge Vivian Hartwell, 67 years old, a sitting federal judge on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals with 31 years on the bench. She had stepped away briefly to use the restroom, leaving the kids with their food and a simple instruction to stay in the booth. The restaurant was busy with the usual weekend crowd. Families with strollers, teenagers crowding the drink station, a few solo diners scrolling through their phones. Nobody was bothering anyone. Nobody was out of line. But near the front counter, a white woman had stopped eating her salad and was staring hard at the 3 children across the dining room. Her name was Karen Lipscomb, 54, and something about those kids and those iPads had already made her decide that what she was seeing didn't add up. Lipscomb stood and walked directly to the counter, where shift manager Devin Osei, 23, was restocking napkin dispensers. She leaned in and told him those kids over there had stolen those iPads out of someone's bag. Devin looked over at the booth, 3 children eating chicken nuggets and watching cartoons. He asked which customer was missing property. Lipscomb didn't answer the question. She said it again, louder this time, that she saw them take the iPads and that if this restaurant didn't do something about it, she would call corporate and report the entire staff for allowing theft. Devin hesitated. He had seen the children come in with their grandmother. He had taken their order himself. The iPads had been in the kids' hands the entire time. No customer had reported anything stolen. No one in the restaurant was looking for missing property, but Lipscomb was loud and getting louder, and Devin was 6 months into a job he couldn't afford to lose. He asked her one more time if she was sure. She told him to stop asking questions and call the police before those kids walked out with somebody else's property. Devin picked up the store phone and dialed 911. The call was recorded. Every word of it would later be played in a federal courtroom. Officer Russell Brandt pulled into the McDonald's parking lot 6 minutes after the 911 call. He was 2 years old with 18 years on the Richmond Metro Police Department. His service record told one story to his supervisors and a very different one to the communities he patrolled. Over the past 14 years, 31 formal complaints had been filed against him, disproportionately from Black and Latino residents. The allegations followed a pattern: excessive force during routine stops, aggressive language during encounters that didn't require aggression, racial slurs caught on a dash cam during a traffic stop 3 years earlier, footage that was mysteriously lost during the internal review process. He had been suspended twice, both times reduced to written reprimands after the police union intervened on his behalf. His supervisors had signed off on every dismissal, every reduced punishment, every second chance. Brandt had learned over the years that complaints didn't stick and consequences didn't come. His body camera was activated when he stepped out of his patrol car. The footage would later show him entering the restaurant, walking past a white family of 5 near the door, past a group of white teenagers by the soda fountain, past 2 elderly white couples sitting near the windows. He didn't stop at the counter to speak with Devin. He didn't look for Lipscomb to get a description or details. He walked directly across the dining room toward the only black children in the restaurant, 3 kids sitting in a corner booth with Happy Meals and iPads. Brandt stopped at the edge of the booth and stood at full height, looking down at the 3 of them. His hand rested on his duty belt. Elijah looked up first. Brandt asked where they got the iPads. Elijah answered politely, telling the officer they were his and his brothers and sisters, that their grandmother had bought them as gifts for their report cards. Brant didn't acknowledge the answer. He looked at the devices, then back at Elijah, and asked how much he thought those iPads cost. Elijah didn't respond. Brant leaned in closer and asked whether anyone in his family even had jobs. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her older brother for reassurance, but Elijah's face had gone still, the kind of stillness a 12-year-old learns when he realizes the adult in front of him isn't interested in the truth. Isaiah, the youngest, pulled his iPad tight against his chest with both hands. Brant pointed at the devices and told all three children to hand them over immediately, calling them suspected stolen property. Elijah asked if they could please wait for their grandmother. She was just in the restroom. Brant said no. He said they could cooperate now or things would get a lot worse. Around them, the restaurant had gone quiet. Families had stopped eating. Conversations had dropped to whispers. At least 4 customers had already raised their phones and started recording. None of the children moved. They sat in that booth, food getting cold, waiting for an adult who would actually listen. Elijah didn't refuse. He hesitated. That was all. A 12-year-old boy looking down at the iPad his grandmother had given him, trying to understand why a police officer was demanding he hand over his own property. That hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds. Brant reached across the table, grabbed Elijah's wrist, and yanked the iPad out of his hands. The motion was fast and hard enough that Elijah's shoulder jerked forward and his elbow knocked over a drink cup, sending orange soda across the tray. Isaiah screamed. Not a defiant scream, not a tantrum. The scream of a 7-year-old watching a grown man in uniform grab his brother. Brant turned to the youngest child and pointed directly at his face. "Shut your mouth before I give you something to cry about." Naomi was frozen, tears running down both cheeks, her iPad sitting on the table in front of her. Brant picked it up out of her trembling hands without a word. Isaiah was still holding his, both arms wrapped around it, pressing it into his small chest like it could protect him. Brant reached down and pried the child's fingers off one by one. When Isaiah still wouldn't let go, Brant pulled the device free and shoved the boy backward into the booth seat. The back of Isaiah's head hit the wall behind the booth with a sound that made the woman in the next table gasp. A man near the counter stood up and shouted, "They're children!" Brant turned toward the dining room, pointed at the crowd, and said anyone who interfered would be arrested for obstruction of justice. He keyed his radio and reported 3 juvenile suspects, possible theft, uncooperative, requesting backup. All 3 children were sobbing. Their Happy Meals sat untouched. The iPads were stacked on the table behind Brant's back like evidence from a crime scene that never existed. Officer Nina Saldano, 29, walked through the front door 4 minutes later. She had been with the department for just under 3 years. What she saw when she entered was not what dispatch had described. There were no juvenile suspects. There was no theft in progress. There were 3 children crying in a booth, a crowd of visibly upset customers, several phones recording from different angles, and her senior officer standing over the scene with 3 iPads lined up on the table behind him like confiscated contraband. Saldano moved to Brant's side and spoke quietly. She told him this looked like a misunderstanding. She said maybe they should talk to the manager and figure out what actually happened before going any further. Brant didn't lower his voice. "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, rookie. These kids are lying." Saldano looked at the children. She looked at the crowd. She looked at the phones pointed in their direction, and she stepped back. She did not intervene. She did not challenge him again. She stood to the side and watched what happened next. Brant told Elijah to stand up. The boy stood slowly, legs unsteady. Brant turned him around and patted him down in front of the entire restaurant. Hands across the boy's pockets, his waistband, his sides. A 12-year-old in a McDonald's being searched like a suspect on a street corner. When Brant was done, he asked all 3 children for identification. They stared at him. They had none. They were children. Brant stepped back to his radio and called dispatch again. He requested a juvenile transport unit and stated his intention to take all 3 minors into custody for theft and uncooperative behavior. In the booth, Naomi held Isaiah's hand. Elijah stood where Brant had left him, arms at his sides, staring at the floor. He didn't say a word. The restroom door opened, and Judge Vivian Hartwell stepped back into the dining room. She had been gone less than 5 minutes. What she walked into was nothing close to what she had left behind. Her 3 grandchildren were crying. Elijah was standing near the booth with his arms at his sides, face blank. Naomi and Isaiah were pressed together in the seat, holding hands. A uniformed officer stood over them with their iPads stacked on the table behind his back. A second officer stood off to the side doing nothing. The restaurant was silent except for the sound of her grandchildren sobbing. Vivian crossed the dining room without hesitation. "What is happening to my grandchildren?" Brant turned. "Ma'am, step back. These children are being detained." Vivian did not step back. She stopped directly in front of him and spoke clearly and without raising her voice. She gave her full name. She told him she was the children's grandmother. She told him the iPads were their personal property, purchased by her 2 weeks ago as gifts for their report cards, and that she had the receipts on her phone if he wanted to see them. Brant cut her off before she could finish. "I don't care who you say you are. I've heard every story in the book. You people always have an excuse." He told her that if she didn't step back immediately, she would be placed under arrest for interfering with a police investigation. Vivian did not move. She looked at him with the kind of stillness that comes from 3 decades of sitting behind a federal bench and hearing every lie, every excuse, and every abuse of authority a courtroom can produce. She said, "I am a federal judge on the 4th Circuit Court of Appeals. You are unlawfully detaining 3 minor children without probable cause, and everything you are doing is being recorded, including by your own body camera." Brant laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not an uncomfortable chuckle, a full, open, dismissive laugh captured in high-definition audio by the body camera mounted on his own chest. A federal judge. "Right, and I'm the president." He told Vivian to sit down or he would put her in handcuffs too. The body camera recorded her expression. It did not change. Vivian asked for his badge number. He refused. She asked for his name. He refused. She asked for his supervisor's name. He told her she wasn't in charge here and to stop asking questions. Vivian reached into her purse, took out her phone, and dialed 911. She identified herself by name and title. She requested that a patrol supervisor be sent to the McDonald's on Broad Street immediately. She stated that an officer was unlawfully detaining her 3 minor grandchildren without probable cause and had used physical force against them. She then made a second call. This one was to her son, Colonel Terrence Hartwell, the children's father, a Judge Advocate General officer stationed at Fort Lee, 30 minutes south. She told him what was happening in 3 short sentences. He said he was on his way. Outside in the parking lot, Officer Saldano had already stepped away from the door. She stood near her patrol car and keyed her radio to dispatch. She asked them to run a name, Vivian Hartwell, federal judge, 4th Circuit Court of Appeals. The response came back in under 2 minutes. Dispatch confirmed the name, the title, the court, and the active appointment. Saldano lowered her radio and stood still in the parking lot. The color had drained from her face. She looked back through the glass doors at Brant, still standing over the booth, and understood exactly what was about to happen. Sergeant Dale Compton, 48, pulled into the McDonald's parking lot 14 minutes after the first call. He had been with the department for 22 years and held a supervisory role over patrol officers in the district. Before he could reach the front door, Saldano stepped into his path. She spoke quickly and quietly. She told him the grandmother of the children inside had identified herself as a federal judge. She told him dispatch had confirmed it. Vivian Hartwell, 4th Circuit Court of Appeals. Active appointment. Compton stopped walking. He looked at Saldano for a long moment without speaking. Then he went inside. The body camera footage from Brant's chest would later show Compton crossing the dining room in 4 seconds. He walked directly to Brant and told him to step away from the family. Now, Brant turned. He started to explain the situation, the call, the iPads, the children's refusal to cooperate. Compton cut him off. "Step away from the family, officer. That is an order. Brandt's jaw tightened. He held his ground for a beat, then stepped back, but his body camera picked up what he said under his breath as he moved. Doesn't matter who she is. Those kids had no business with that kind of stuff. The microphone was 3 inches from his mouth. Every word was recorded. Compton approached Vivian, lowered his voice, and attempted to de-escalate. He returned the 3 iPads to the children. He apologized for the interaction and said the department would look into what had occurred. Vivian handed 1 iPad to Naomi, 1 to Isaiah, and 1 to Elijah. Then she looked at Compton and told him she was not accepting his apology. She said this was not a misunderstanding. This was racial profiling of 3 children. This was physical aggression against minors. Her youngest grandson's head had been slammed into a wall. Her oldest grandson had been patted down in a public restaurant, and every moment of it was going to be addressed formally, thoroughly, and publicly. Compton nodded but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The first cell phone video hit social media before the Hartwell family had even left the parking lot. It was posted by a college student named Aisha Cohn, 20, who had been sitting 2 booths away eating a McFlurry when Brandt walked in. Her phone had been recording from the moment Brandt grabbed Elijah's wrist. The footage ran just over 9 minutes. It captured the grab, Isaiah's scream, Brandt telling a 7-year-old to shut his mouth, the moment Isaiah's head hit the wall, the pat-down of a 12-year-old boy, Vivian's arrival, her calm identification as a federal judge, and Brandt's laugh. That single video reached 2 million views within 48 hours. It was shared across every major platform. News outlets picked it up the same day. Local affiliates ran segments that evening. National networks followed by morning. The headline wrote itself. The McDonald's had 6 security cameras covering the dining room from different angles. All 6 were recording that Saturday afternoon. When attorneys for the Hartwell family filed a preservation request, the footage was subpoenaed within the week. It showed everything. Every angle confirmed what the cell phone videos had already made public. Brandt's body camera footage was requested through official channels the same day the story broke. The Richmond Metro Police Department did not release it. A spokesperson issued a statement saying the footage was part of an ongoing internal investigation and could not be made available at that time. Civil rights organizations called the delay a cover-up. Legal analysts pointed out that the department had no legal obligation to withhold the footage and every reason to suppress it. Online petitions demanding its release gathered over 300,000 signatures in 5 days. The pressure was building from every direction, and the department had no good options left. The footage existed. The public knew it existed, and no amount of delay was going to change what was on it. The Richmond Metro Police Department released its first public statement 48 hours after the videos went viral. It read like every department statement that had ever been written after a scandal broke too fast to contain. We take all allegations of misconduct seriously and are conducting a thorough and transparent review of the incident. We are committed to the highest standards of professionalism and community trust. No names were mentioned, no specifics were given, no accountability was acknowledged. The police union followed with its own statement the next day, calling Officer Brandt a dedicated veteran of the force and defending what it described as his right to investigate a reported crime. The union emphasized that Brandt had responded to a 911 call and followed standard procedures for handling a theft complaint. What the union did not address was what happened after he arrived. The 911 call itself was obtained through a public records request filed by a local journalist within 72 hours. The recording was 3 minutes and 14 seconds long. In it, Devin Osei's voice was hesitant, uncertain. He told the dispatcher that a customer had reported a possible theft involving children in the dining room. When the dispatcher asked what evidence there was, Devin paused. He said he wasn't sure. He said a customer had insisted. That was the entire basis for the call. No description of stolen property, no identified victim, no crime observed by any employee. Devin gave a full statement to the press the following week. He said he never believed the children had stolen anything. He said he had watched them come in with their grandmother, had taken their order himself, and had seen the iPads in their hands the entire time. He said he made the call because Karen Lipscomb had threatened to report him to corporate and he was afraid of losing his job. Lipscomb was identified online within days. Her name, her photo, and her role in the 911 call became public knowledge through social media and news coverage. She issued no public comment. She deleted her social media accounts and did not respond to interview requests. Internal Affairs opened a formal investigation into Brandt's conduct. He was placed on paid administrative leave, which drew its own wave of outrage. Community groups held a rally outside the police department's central office. Civil rights organizations issued joint statements demanding Brandt's immediate termination and criminal prosecution. The department said nothing further. The silence only made it louder. Judge Vivian Hartwell understood the legal system better than almost anyone involved. She had spent 31 years presiding over federal cases, including civil rights matters, constitutional disputes, and cases involving law enforcement misconduct. She knew exactly what needed to happen, and she knew she could not be the one to do it. She recused herself from any proceedings connected to the incident and instead connected her son, Colonel Terrence Hartwell, with civil rights attorney Diane Achebe. Achebe was 51 years old and had spent 2 decades building a national reputation as one of the most effective litigators in police misconduct and civil rights violations against minors. She had argued cases before federal appellate courts, had secured multi-million-dollar settlements against 3 major metropolitan police departments, and had never lost a case involving documented use of force against a child. She reviewed the evidence in the Hartwell case and told the family it was among the most clear-cut she had ever seen. Achebe filed a federal civil rights lawsuit seeking $8.4 million in damages. The defendants named in the suit were Officer Russell Brandt personally, Officer Nina Saldano for failure to intervene and protect the children, the Richmond Metro Police Department for systemic failure to discipline and supervise, and the City of Richmond for institutional negligence. The complaint cited unlawful detention of 3 minor children without probable cause, excessive force against minors, racial profiling, emotional and psychological harm, assault on a minor resulting in physical injury, specifically the impact of Isaiah's head against the wall, and a documented pattern of ignored complaints that had enabled Brandt's behavior over more than a decade. All 3 children underwent independent psychological evaluations conducted by board-certified child psychologists. The results were consistent across all 3. Elijah, 12, had become withdrawn and refused to go to public places without a parent or grandparent present. Naomi, 10, experienced episodes of anxiety in the presence of authority figures and had difficulty sleeping. Isaiah, 7, had developed a pronounced fear of uniformed officers. He flinched at the sound of sirens. He had recurring nightmares about a man in uniform taking things from his hands. He had asked his father more than once whether the police were going to come back for him. He was 7 years old. The discovery phase broke the case wide open. Achebe's team subpoenaed 14 years of internal records, and what came back was a paper trail of institutional failure, so thorough it read like a manual on how to protect bad officers. Brandt's file contained 31 formal complaints: excessive force, racially charged language, disproportionate targeting of Black and Latino residents. Each complaint had been reviewed by Internal Affairs. Each one had been dismissed. Dashcam footage from a 2021 traffic stop in which Brandt used a racial slur had been logged into the evidence system and then marked as corrupted. The file was never recovered. 2 officers who had previously reported Brandt's behavior were identified in the records. One was transferred to a less desirable precinct within 3 months. The other received his first negative performance review in 8 years, 6 weeks after raising concerns. Saldano's own records became part of the case. 3 months before the McDonald's incident, she had submitted a written report flagging Brandt's racially motivated behavior during calls they had responded to together. Her supervisor acknowledged receipt in an email. No action was taken. The department's Internal Affairs Division was subjected to an independent audit. Over the previous 10 years, 89% of racial profiling complaints had been dismissed without discipline. The rate for complaints filed by Black civilians against white officers was 91%. Expert witnesses testified on the psychological impact of police aggression on black children. Dr. Lenora Graves, a child psychologist specializing in racial trauma, presented studies showing that aggressive law enforcement encounters during childhood produced lasting effects: heightened anxiety, chronic distrust, withdrawal from public spaces. She testified that all three Hartwell children exhibited those symptoms. Elijah had told his parents he didn't want to go outside without an adult anymore. He had stopped walking home from school with friends. He was 12 years old. Brant was terminated. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. A federal grand jury indicted him on 3 counts of assault on a minor, unlawful detention, and deprivation of rights under color of law. He pleaded not guilty. His attorney argued he had responded to a legitimate 911 call and followed procedure. The trial lasted 9 days. The jury saw everything: body camera footage showing him grab a 12-year-old's wrist, shout at a 7-year-old, pry a child's fingers off an iPad, and shove that child into a wall. 6 angles of McDonald's security footage, cell phone videos from 4 customers, the 911 call that started it all, 3 minutes of a shift manager reporting a complaint he never believed, and Brant's own words captured by his own equipment. Those kids had no business with that kind of stuff. The jury deliberated less than 5 hours. Guilty on all counts, 4 years federal prison. Saldana was fired for failure to intervene. 2 supervisors who dismissed prior complaints were demoted. The police chief was forced to resign after records showed he had personally signed off on dismissing 14 complaints against Brant over 7 years, including the lost dashcam footage. The city of Richmond settled the civil lawsuit for the full $8.4 million. No negotiation, no reduced offer. The footage was indefensible, and every attorney in the city's legal office knew it. The Hartwell family used a portion of the settlement to establish the Hartwell Children's Justice Initiative, a nonprofit providing free legal representation and trauma counseling to children who had been subjected to police misconduct. Diane Achebe joined the advisory board. Within its first year, the initiative took on 37 cases across Virginia, most of them involving Black and Latino minors who had been stopped, searched, or detained without cause. Elijah continued therapy twice a week. Progress was slow, but it was real. He started walking to school again. He began talking to friends about what happened instead of going quiet when the subject came up. One evening after dinner, he told his grandmother he wanted to be a lawyer. Vivian looked at him for a long moment and told him he could be whatever he wanted to be. Isaiah still flinched at sirens. His therapist said the response was involuntary and would take time. He slept with a nightlight now and sometimes crawled into his father's bed after a bad dream. He was 7. Naomi wrote a letter to her school about what had happened in the McDonald's that Saturday afternoon. Her teacher helped her revise it. The local paper published it on the front page of the community section. She was 10 years old, and her words were clearer than most of the statements the police department had released. The McDonald's on Broad Street installed a small plaque near the corner booth. It read, "Every child deserves to feel safe." The Richmond Metro Police Department entered a federal consent decree requiring independent civilian oversight, quarterly bias audits, mandatory de-escalation training for all officers, and a zero-tolerance policy for complaints involving minors. Body camera compliance became subject to random monthly review with automatic suspension for violations. Brant walked into a McDonald's and saw 3 black children with iPads. He didn't see kids, he saw suspects. A federal judge saw her grandchildren crying, and a jury saw the truth. If you think this situation was bad, wait until you see what happens in the case on the right-hand side.
Welcome back. We are here to relentlessly pursue the truth and hold those in power accountable. Because while words can be twisted, the records simply do not lie. Thank you for joining us today.